In this week's Bizline, Vietnam, a promising destination for the global semiconductor industry. And later on, European-Vietnamese collaboration fuels green initiatives. Hello there and welcome to Bizline, our weekly economic journal on VTV International. I'm Hoàng Hằng, and as usual, we now take a look at news making headlines in Vietnam's economic scene this week.
Vietnam recognizes the importance of developing high technology, particularly in the semiconductor industry, as a key driver for growth and a great opportunity for businesses. The establishment of the Vietnam Semiconductor Network aims to gradually fulfill the development goals of the semiconductor industry, positioning Vietnam as a trusted partner in the regional and global semiconductor ecosystem. This will help elevate Vietnam's position in the global value chain and contribute to the modernization of its economy. To support this initiative, Vietnam recently has established the National Innovation Center and 3 well-equipped high-tech parks in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and Da Nang. These parks are ready to welcome investors in the semiconductor industry.
Vietnam continues to attract increasing foreign direct investment, FDI, with a total of $18 billion invested during the first 10 months of 2023. This marks the highest amount of realized FDI in a 10-month period over the past 5 years. The processing and manufacturing industry received the largest portion, reaching nearly $15 billion, which accounts for over 82% of the total.
Vietnam recorded a trade surplus of over $24.6 billion in the past 10 months, marking the highest figure in the last 5 years, according to the Ministry of Industry and Trade. This represents an increase of over 2.5 times compared to the same period last year, largely due to a significant reduction in imports. Specifically, imports decreased by over 12% in the past 10 months compared to the same period last year, totaling only $267 billion. However, imports began to recover in October with a 3% increase.
Vietnam's 5% broken rice has risen to a 15-year peak of $653 per ton, exceeding that of competitors Thailand and Pakistan. It is now 16.6% higher than Thailand's and 16% higher than Pakistan's, according to the Vietnam Food Association. Industry insiders say that the price surge came thanks to rising demand globally and the improving quality of Vietnamese rice. In the first 10 months, Vietnam exported 7.1 million tons of rice, up 35% in volume, according to Vietnam Customs. The figure can reach a new milestone of 7.8 million by the end of the year.
According to the Vietnam National Authority of Tourism, Vietnam's total revenue from tourists reached $23.7 billion in the first 10 months of 2023. During this period, the country welcomed 10 million foreign tourists, surpassing the target of 8 million for the entire year. Additionally, it served 98.7 million domestic holidaymakers. In October alone, the tourism sector catered to 1.11 million foreign visitors and 5.2 million domestic tourists.
The Vietnamese gaming industry has achieved an annual revenue of over $500 million, making it the 5th largest in Southeast Asia. Notably, there has been a substantial increase in revenue, and more than half of the population now has access to video games for entertainment. Local game developers such as Aminos and Sky Mavis have gained global recognition and have also contributed to the creation of high-value jobs in programming and design. Looking ahead, the gaming industry in Vietnam will require around 30,000 workers, presenting an opportunity for young people, particularly Generation Z.
Those were some highlights from Vietnam's economic scene. Up next, we will look into the European and Vietnamese collaboration to fuel green initiatives and green economy in Vietnam in our crosstalk. To maintain a sustainable growth in the future, Vietnam must develop a green economy with modern technology. Meanwhile, the European Union is at the forefront of green transformation and green technology. This is the catalyst for the EU to empower Vietnam on its path to fuel green initiatives and accelerate the transition process. The message was emphasized at the Green Economy Forum 2023 organized by the European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam earlier this week. Let's find out how this contributes towards Vietnam's green, efficient and sustainable future.
Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte participated in the 2023 Green Economy Forum, organized by the European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam on Thursday. The Dutch Prime Minister praised Vietnam's commitment to the green energy transition. They acknowledged the country's efforts and solutions in cooperating with EU partners to promote renewable energy and green hydrogen development.
We are all here because we believe that green growth is the future. We share the same ambitions, and together we can turn them into reality. Vietnam is known as the rising dragon, and it's certainly living up to that name.
At the forum, Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh stated that Vietnam is striving for green production, green exports, and green energy. This approach will enable investors to run their businesses effectively and sustainably in the long term.
Chúng tôi là nước đang phát triển, là một nền kinh tế đang chuyển đổi. Chúng tôi gặp khó khăn. Vì vậy mong là chúng tôi ủng hộ EU và chấp hành các cái quy định của EU, nhưng mà EU cũng chia sẻ với chúng tôi và giúp đỡ chúng tôi. Một là về xây dựng thể chế, xây dựng chính sách. Cái thứ hai là cái chuyển giao công nghệ cho chúng tôi, rồi hỗ trợ về tài chính, rồi vấn đề quản trị làm sao cho nó khoa học, làm sao cho nó phát triển tốt.
The Green Economy Forum 2023 takes place 1 month prior to the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP28. This forum represents the ongoing collaborative efforts between Europe and Vietnam.
We believe that now is the time to translate that ambition into a very specific action. So the main goal for today is to share best practices, also to have a voice on behalf of European businesses in Vietnam, but also Vietnamese companies, showing our commitment and our willingness to support Vietnam in this road towards carbon net zero.
The Green Economy Forum is expected to equip Vietnam and its businesses with the resources needed to meet and adapt to changing global standards. The European Union is collaborating with the Vietnamese government on the green transition process. Furthermore, European businesses are actively assisting the Vietnamese business community to expedite this process.
Building on the success of last year's event, the Green Economy Forum 2023 focuses on solutions to help Vietnam shorten the journey toward a green economy. A hallmark of Vietnam's effort toward a green economy has been renewable energy development, green technology deployment, and sustainable practices. We sat down with Eurocham board member Stuart Livesey to find out how Vietnam can efficiently navigate this transition. Let's take a listen. Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Now, the Green Economy Forum is an event for businesses and governments to accelerate dialogue and discussion for green growth in Vietnam. So what is high on the agenda of this year's event, and how can it pave the way for successful transition for Vietnam?
This is a dialogue. This is not an exhibition. This is not a ceremony for companies to say we're better than each other. This is all about engagement. And what you get to see is you get to hear from the industry, what are they thinking about, what is their appetite, what are their problems, and then to hear from the government, what are the difficulties they're having and how do they need to deal with this. And so we're sharing complexities, but also trying to have dialogue to seek a resolution going forward. How do we mitigate these, and how does the industry react to the needs of Vietnam and the government? Because it's a very complex matter, and you shouldn't underestimate how difficult it is to decide this. So Eurocham is bringing together all these bodies in the Green Economic Forum, in the heart of the government sector, so which is why we've chosen Hanoi. And all the ministries are here so they can get engaged.
Building upon roots laid by GFI 2022, what do you think are the most notable highlights in terms of EU-Vietnam cooperation in terms of green initiatives?
Yeah, well, I mean, the good news is that Europe is still extremely excited about Vietnam's journey, and we've got multiple companies that we're representing trying to get involved, and Eurocham is the voice to some extent to try and expose those to the ministries. So the companies are seeking to try and express their will and their level of support that they want to get involved in, and also see how the government what they want from these companies. So bringing together all these entities in a forum is really the way that we need to try and deliver this together. Prior to the last GFI 2022, the Prime Minister has engaged several task forces, involved the private sector. We've also had the Just Energy Transition Partnership that was agreed in December. And all these different forums have actually brought ministries, working sectors, non-governmental organisations and the industry together in a panel discussion and said, how do we solve this? Let's get everyone's point of view together and how do we deliver this? And this GFI 2022 was a little bit of a catalyst to try and get all these stakeholders together in different forums to share knowledge and to try and provide the government with some potential solutions that they can consider.
Vietnam has significantly improved its energy security, focusing more on sustainable economic growth. This has been achieved through its entry into the Just Energy Transition Partnership JETP and the approval of Power Development Plan PDP-8.
Vietnam entered the JETP agreement in December 2022, which is in fact a very big fund of more than $15 billion to help Vietnam to accelerate the transition to green energy. The second thing, which is very remarkable, which happened in May of this year, was the signing of the Power Development Plan 8 by the Prime Minister. With that PDP-8 signed off, now both European and Vietnamese companies have more confidence that Vietnam will actually start to implement these plans.
Although Vietnam has several distinct advantages, it also faces specific challenges in the implementation of its JETP and PDP-8.
Well, in order to commercialize, bankability is important. No one international developer will build without having a certainty about bankability. Another aspect is that it takes time to build a regulatory framework, and we fully understand that, and we fully respect this is something Vietnam needs to decide upon.
DPPA framework is one thing, but we need to think about how DPPAs can still contribute on grid connection, on grid maintenance and grid investment. Because we all know that the biggest challenge Vietnam is facing now is the investment in a much more reliable and stable grid infrastructure. And that's going to take a lot of years and even a lot more money.
Delegates at the Green Economic Forum highlighted that Vietnam is one of the world's fastest growing economies. Consequently, its power consumption is expected to grow approximately twice as fast as its GDP, which presents a significant challenge. As such, the transition to a greener economy requires a collective effort from the government, private sector, and the populace.
But we also should not forget what needs to be done on the consumer side, because if the consumers can be incentivized to use power more efficiently, that's going to avoid having to invest a lot of capex in producing that much of additional power, right? So any kind of policy support that helps consumers to, let's say, move towards more efficient practices or habits in terms of power consumption, here I think it will go a long way in making sure the PDP-8 moves forward faster and also achieves its ambitions that has been set forth.
Under PDP-8, the objective is to make renewable energy 50% of Vietnam's energy mix by 2050, while concurrently phasing out all coal-fired plants. The goal for renewable energy sources in electricity generation is set at 47%, in line with Vietnam's commitment to the Just Energy Transition Partnership JETP.
Vietnam is said to have great potential for renewable energy. So what do you think are the current barriers and implications for the renewable energy sector in Vietnam?
You also need to reflect on the fact that it's not just great potential. Vietnam has actually delivered a huge amount of renewable energy so far, and we shouldn't underestimate what Vietnam has achieved. It's one of the highest renewable energy generators in Southeast Asia, and that's a significant milestone. But there's plenty more to do. Vietnam is an extremely lucky country in the fact that it's got a lot of renewable energy sources on its doorstep, solar and wind in particular. To get there with the newer technologies, there are really three main issues that it needs to sort of resolve. The first of these is the regulations and the policies, and these are relatively complex. A lot of laws and regulations in Vietnam are intertwined, which means as soon as you try to change one, several others need to be considered. So there's regulatory pathways that need to be considered, particularly for offshore wind. This is elements such as Decree 11 and the implementation of Power Development Plan 8. How are these projects going to go forward? Secondly would be the grid, making sure the grid is robust and able to transfer the renewable energy and be built out accordingly. And thirdly is the offtake mechanism. How are the finances going to be dealt with? How are people going to sell renewable energy to the grid?
Now, how would frameworks such as PDP-8 and JETP impact the future of renewable energy in Vietnam?
So PDP-8 has set the structure. It's the foundation for what the ambitions are going to be and some good ideas of how the initial projects from PDP-7 are going to incorporate, and then strategic aspects, sort of energy transmission from north to south and phasing out coal. So these are really great to see. The implementation plan is the second step, and that is how. That's the how answer. How do we deliver those? And that's what a lot of the industry and a lot of the different stakeholders are looking for. So that's the dialogue that's going on. The JETP, the Just Energy Transition Partnership, this is part of the how response. I mean, it will not solve everything, but what it does is it's an agreement that's based on the green transition. And providing that it keeps within the confines of what JETP stands for, the finances behind JETP can be used to open up different renewable energy technologies or strategic assessments to deliver this. So there's a really good way of tapping into this $15.5 billion worth of dollars worth of subsidy to actually get into some sort of loans or grants to open up these doors. So JETP is definitely part of the how. It just needs to be considered strategically.
Under the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism CBAM, starting October 1st, the EU's trading partners are required to report greenhouse gas emissions embedded in 6 carbon-intensive exports. Experts suggest that adhering to this mechanism will assist Vietnamese firms in avoiding setbacks in the development of a sustainable value chain and a green economy.
The good thing is that Vietnam is very willing to try to comply with these upcoming regulations, and we as Eurocham also tell the Vietnamese government and the Vietnamese companies and the European companies active in Vietnam that it's actually a great opportunity if Vietnam is able to comply with this very tough new legislation. It can actually outperform compared to some other countries who may not yet be ready in time.
Experts have urged Vietnam to take immediate action to ensure its industries are prepared for the new tax regime. Meeting CBAM requirements will benefit Vietnamese producers by enabling their products to be sold in EU markets in the future.
The global economy is a bit down, and the requirement and the demand is a bit slow, so it's a good time to use this to start the journey and look what you can do first to make sure that you will be able in 26 to follow all the requirement or most of the requirement.
Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is not only a trend, but also a necessity for businesses in Vietnam to compete internationally. While many businesses surveyed currently do not perceive CBAM as a threat, its impact could be significant if the mechanism is expanded.
Now, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, has a direct impact on several carbon-intensive industries in Vietnam. So how would Vietnamese producers and exporters better prepare for CBAM once it is permanent in 2026?
The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism is one of several new EU directives, and these will actually affect every country that's interacting with Europe. It can be seen as a negative effect, but what you actually must also understand that it's a positive opportunity for countries such as Vietnam, because Europe will only start to trade with people that are willing to to start taking into account the carbon border mechanism and start reporting on the directives. And there is a potential for some sort of premium to be involved on that. There is a way for tax incentives to come back as part of the system. So my main sort of comment would be, don't be afraid of this. It will take a little bit more time in terms of reporting and tracking through sort of dialogue and making sure you're auditing yourself, but it's definitely an opportunity for Vietnam to get more engaged with the European businesses that are going to have to follow this.
How does Eurocham plan to assist local companies in terms of ESG implementation and sustainable supply chain and manufacturing?
I mean, Eurocham is very, very supportive on this fact, and we've had several workshops and business briefings already on this. We work with many of the chambers that we have as part of our group here in Vietnam, and we're trying to share sort of knowledge on what does this actually mean. If you're a supplier, if you're a generator, what does this mean to you? Talk you through the process and show you that these mechanisms, these directives don't necessarily come into force immediately. There's a gradual process and it's a learning curve. So it's a matter of sort of sharing the information with Vietnamese businesses and saying, let us support you on the journey. If you need anything else, we can provide entities, consultants that can support you moving forward. So I think Eurocham has got a really good opportunity to deliver part of Vietnam's requirements here.
Given Europe's expertise in green, sustainable industries and high-tech manufacturing, European businesses are well placed to lead this initiative. Numerous companies have expressed interest in aiding Vietnam's transition towards a greener economy.
We have experience in other parts of the world of having supplied technologies to help our customers to go through this energy transition, and we are doing the same in Vietnam. Schneider can provide a lot of support to our customers, both in terms of supplying technology solutions, supplying products, as well as supplying expertise in order to help to go through this decarbonization journey.
An increase in EU investment would allow Vietnam to better integrate into global value chains.
And many of these companies are considering to make substantial investments in Vietnam in the high-tech sector, in the chip sector. Also under the JETP agreement, there is funding available for the transfer of technology to fast-track the transition into a greener economy.
European companies that specialize in energy-efficient technologies can offer innovative solutions. These can help Vietnamese industries and companies adopt best practices more efficiently, thereby hastening their transition to a greener economy.
Vietnam is aiming to attract high-quality FDI with green and environmentally friendly projects. So how can Vietnam facilitate EU investment in these projects in the coming time?
I think the key thing that Vietnam needs to recognize is that as a lot of Europe is progressing and a lot of the world is progressing, quality is a key factor here, but also the actual carbon footprint of that quality is an even bigger entity to some extent. Green energy is one of the fundamental aspects of this. And with a huge amount of renewable energy capability in Vietnam, Vietnam needs to recognize that it should expand that. And there's an opportunity then, if it actually gets the renewable energy industry growing, even though it may come at a cost, that it can actually charge that premium directly to off-takers. We heard from several big investors in the session before that they're willing to pay a premium as long as they can get green energy. They don't want fossil fuel-based energy, and in fact the people that buy from them and the people that invest in them do not want to see them invest in fossil fuel technology. So green energy can be produced and it can actually be charged at for a tariff. So if the Vietnamese government can make sure that the mechanisms in place for direct power purchase agreements and offtake, that's a real opportunity to sort of build the renewable energy industry without having to rely too much on the government itself funding it.
To maintain export in the future, Vietnam needs a low-carbon circular economy with appropriate technology, while the EU is a pioneer in green technology. So what experience can Vietnam learn from the EU to promote green technology?
Through entities like Eurocham and bringing in governmental officials that have actually been part of this from various countries within Europe to say, these are the issues we had at the beginning of the journey, this is how we've solved them. But it's also to remember that Europe hasn't solved everything, and not necessarily everything that Europe has provided is correct. Some will not work in Vietnam, but there will be a way of delivering a circular carbon economy in Vietnam. So take the learnings, take the knowledge, absorb what you can, and then make sure it fits for Vietnam. There will be elements where Vietnam is actually probably more advanced than Europe, and it should consider taking these in and with all the industry sectors that it has and all the stakeholders present, how we deliver on those. So I think there's it's a two-way process here.
Now, how can the EU assist Vietnam in its transition toward green technology in the future?
It's about partnerships and it's about sharing. I think it's just about sort of making sure that between Vietnam and Europe, the two entities make sure industries and sectors and companies really just talk to each other. So business matching events, supply chain events, any way that you can get the suppliers, the developers, the interested stakeholders talking. And so Green Economic Forum today is another way of just getting these people together in the same room, exchanging business cards, talking about the problems, talking about the ways that they've solved them. It's a matching element. So I think the government really needs to sort of initiate events such as this or encourage sharing sessions. And once you get the people in the room, that's where the magic happens.
Well, once again, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
While Vietnam's achievements are significant, the journey is ongoing and sustained efforts are necessary to overcome the dramatic shift in the global trade landscape. It demands a huge pool of resources, especially for upskilling the workforce, deploying technology, developing infrastructure, and promoting a business environment that promotes innovation. In the face of these challenges, close collaboration between the EU and Vietnam can help Vietnam make small steps towards its green and sustainable future. And on that note, we wrap up this edition of BizLine. Stay with us for more content or download our app VTV Go from App Store or Google Play for a lot more. Until next time.